My brother stole my inheritance by forging Dad's signature, so I sent him the security footage from the lawyer's office. I was 23 when Dad died. Pancreatic cancer took him in 4 months. Near the end, he could barely hold a pen, but his mind stayed sharp. He called me to the hospital 3 days before he passed. "There's something I need to tell you about the will," he said, gripping my hand with what little strength he had left. "Your brother doesn't know, but I'm splitting everything 70-30. You get the larger share." "Dad, that's not fair to him," I started. He cut me off. "Listen, I paid for his rehab 3 times, bailed him out of 2 DUIs, gave him $50,000 to start that business he never launched. You put yourself through nursing school. You never asked for anything. This is what's right." I tried to argue, but he was exhausted. The conversation ended there. 2 weeks after the funeral, I sat in Attorney Morrison's office with my brother beside me. Morrison pulled out the will, adjusted his glasses, and began reading. "As per the last wishes of your father, the estate valued at approximately $800,000 will be divided equally between his 2 children." My stomach dropped. "Equally?" Morrison continued reading. "The house, the investments, Dad's life insurance, everything split 50-50. I stared at my brother. He wouldn't meet my eyes. After the meeting, I cornered him in the parking lot. Dad told me about the real will. He said 70-30. My brother shrugged. "Well, Morrison just read it. 50-50. Maybe Dad changed his mind before he died. But something felt wrong. Dad had been so insistent, so clear. He couldn't have changed it. He could barely sign his name those last few days." I called Morrison the next morning. "Is there any way to verify when Dad signed the will?" There was a long pause. "The will is dated March 15th, 2 days before he passed." That was impossible. Dad was unconscious on March 15th. I was there. I'd been holding vigil for 72 hours straight. The nurses could confirm it. The medical records would show it. "I need to see the signature," I said. Morrison hesitated. "I'm not sure that's appropriate without your brother present." "Please," I interrupted. "Something's not right. I was with Dad on March 15th. He couldn't have signed anything." The concern in my voice must have convinced him. He agreed to let me view the document in his office the next day. When I saw Dad's signature, my blood ran cold. The handwriting was shaky but legible, far too steady for someone who couldn't lift a spoon those final days. The letters had a practiced quality to them, like someone had traced them carefully. I pulled out the birthday card Dad had signed for me just a week before he died. His real signature was barely a scribble, nearly illegible. His hand had been trembling so badly that he'd apologized for the messy writing. These signatures weren't even close. Morrison studied both documents, his face growing pale. "I think we may have a problem," he said quietly. I hired a handwriting analyst that afternoon, a woman named Dr. Patricia Holbrook who'd testified in dozens of fraud cases. She examined both signatures under magnification for 2 hours. "These were written by 2 different people," she said finally. "The pressure points are wrong, the stroke patterns don't match. Whoever forged this practiced it multiple times but couldn't replicate the natural tremor of someone with advanced cancer." She wrote up her findings in a detailed report. It was damning evidence, but I knew my brother would argue it was inconclusive. Handwriting analysis could be challenged in court. His expensive lawyers would tear it apart. I needed more. That night, I lay awake thinking about the timeline. March 15th. Dad had been unconscious. I'd been at the hospital. My brother had been... where exactly? I called the hospital the next morning and spoke to the head nurse on Dad's floor. She remembered me. I'd practically lived there those last 2 weeks. "Can you check your records for March 15th? I asked. "I need to know what time my brother visited." She pulled up the visitor logs. "Your brother signed in at 9:47 a.m. and left at 10:23 a.m. He didn't return that day. So he'd been at the hospital for 36 minutes in the morning, then disappeared." Dad had been unconscious by then. There was no deathbed signature, no last-minute change of heart. That's when I remembered the security cameras. Morrison's office building was new, built just 18 months earlier. After a break-in during construction, they'd installed a comprehensive security system, cameras in every hallway, every entrance, every elevator. If my brother had physically delivered that forged will to Morrison's office, there would be footage. I reached out to an old friend from nursing school whose husband worked in building security for commercial properties. Over coffee, I explained the situation without mentioning names or specifics. "Do buildings really keep security footage for months?" I asked. "Depends on the system," she said. "Most commercial buildings keep 60 to 90 days before recording over. After that, it's gone unless someone specifically saves it." She made a call to a contact. 2 days later, I had information. Morrison's building kept footage for 90 days. March 15th was 64 days ago. I had maybe 2 weeks before it was automatically erased. I filed a formal request through my lawyer, a woman named Patricia Chen, who'd been a friend since college. She agreed to help pro bono once I explained the situation. We filed an emergency motion to preserve the security footage, citing suspected forgery and fraud. We requested the footage from March 14th, 15th, and 16th, a 3-day window around the alleged signature date. My brother got wind of it within hours. His lawyer called Patricia, furious. "This is a baseless fishing expedition. You're harassing my client during his time of grief. Then he has nothing to worry about." Patricia replied coolly. "If the footage shows nothing suspicious, this ends immediately." That night, my brother showed up at my apartment. He pounded on the door at nearly midnight. I checked the peephole and saw him standing there, face red, fists clenched. I opened the door with the chain still on. "What the hell are you doing?" he shouted. You're really going to drag Dad's memory through court over some paranoid conspiracy theory? I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Did you forge his signature? His face changed. Just for a second, something flickered behind his eyes. Guilt, panic, something. You're insane, he said. Grief is making you crazy. Dad changed his mind before he died. He wanted us to be equal. Then let's see the security footage, I replied calmly. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize and we'll never speak of this again. We can move forward like nothing happened. He stared at me for a long moment. You're destroying our family over money. No, I said. You did that when you forged Dad's signature while he was dying. He left without another word. I heard his car peel out of the parking lot. The judge granted my motion 2 days later. The building management was ordered to preserve all security footage from March 14th through March 16th and provide copies to both legal teams. 3 days after that, Patricia and I sat in Morrison's conference room with a representative from building security. They loaded the footage onto a laptop, organized by camera and timestamp. We started with March 15th. The camera covering Morrison's office door showed a quiet hallway for most of the morning. At 10:47 a.m., Morrison himself appeared, walking into his office carrying his briefcase. He'd been in court that morning for a different client. At 11:15 a.m., he left for lunch. At 2:47 p.m., the hallway was empty, silent. Then, at 2:51 p.m., my brother walked into frame. I felt my chest tighten. He was alone. He glanced up and down the hallway, checking for witnesses, then pulled something from inside his jacket. A manila envelope. He tried Morrison's door. It was locked. For a moment, he just stood there looking around nervously. Then he crouched down and slid the envelope through the mail slot at the bottom of Morrison's door. The whole thing took 38 seconds. He stood up, brushed off his pants, and walked away. Patricia paused the footage. That's your brother delivering the forged will directly into Morrison's office. We watched him disappear around the corner. The timestamp read 2:52 p.m. I felt sick. Not just because of what he'd done, but because of how calculated it had been. He'd waited until Morrison was gone. He'd brought the envelope ready. He'd planned every second of it. We need Morrison's testimony, Patricia said. This footage shows your brother entered the office area and delivered something, but we need Morrison to confirm he never saw your father or any authorized courier. I called Morrison immediately. He answered on the second ring. I need to ask you about March 15th, I said. How did you receive my father's will? There was a pause. By courier service, he said. Your father was too ill to come in person, so the document was delivered to my office. What courier service? Another pause. Longer this time. I'm not certain. It was left in my mail slot while I was out. Did you see the person who delivered it? No, he admitted. I found it when I returned from lunch around 3:30 p.m. Was anyone in your office that day who could confirm receiving it? My assistant was also out. We'd both been in court that morning, then took lunch. The office was empty from 11:15 until I returned. I felt the pieces falling into place. So someone, anyone, could have walked up to your door and slipped an envelope through the mail slot without being seen by your staff. Theoretically, yes, Morrison said. He sounded uncomfortable now. But I had no reason to suspect. We have security footage, I interrupted. My brother delivered that envelope. At 2:51 p.m., alone. There was no courier service. The line went silent. I need you to review your files, I continued. Everything related to receiving that will. Then I need you to tell me if anything else seems wrong. He called back the next morning, his voice shaken. I've reviewed everything. According to my records, the will arrived with a cover letter claiming to be from your father. The letter stated he'd arranged for delivery through a family friend due to his condition. I had no reason to question it at the time. But now you do, I said. Now I do, he agreed. I'm going to cooperate fully with your investigation. If there's been fraud, it happened through my office. I need to protect my practice. Patricia filed an amended complaint with the district attorney's office. We presented everything. The handwriting analysis, the hospital visitor logs showing my brother had left hours before the supposed signature time, Morrison's testimony about receiving an anonymous delivery, and the security footage. The DA assigned an investigator. While we waited for the criminal investigation to proceed, I started digging deeper into my brother's activities. Something about the whole situation felt too organized, too calculated for someone acting on impulse. I requested Dad's financial records from the bank. It took 3 weeks and a court order. But when the statements arrived, what I found made my stomach turn. My brother had been draining Dad's accounts systematically. The day after Dad died, literally the next morning, he'd transferred $87,000 from Dad's savings account to his personal checking. 2 days later, another $42,000 from an investment account. Then $23,000 from a CD that hadn't matured yet, paying the early withdrawal penalty. But it wasn't just the amounts. It was the precision. He'd left just enough in each account to avoid triggering fraud alerts. He'd structured the transfers to look like estate management rather than theft. He'd been planning this. I called Patricia immediately. We need to add financial fraud to the charges. She reviewed the statements. This is worse than I thought. He's been stealing since the moment your father died. This isn't opportunistic. This is premeditated. We found more. Dad's classic car, a 1967 Mustang he'd spent 5 years restoring, had been sold to a private buyer for $35,000 cash. My brother had forged Dad's signature on the title transfer. Dad's coin collection, worth about $18,000, had been sold to a dealer. Again, forged signature. Even Dad's life insurance payout, $150,000, had been redirected to my brother's account using a fraudulent beneficiary change form filed 3 days after Dad died. In total, he'd stolen nearly $400,000. Patricia filed an amended complaint. The charges now included multiple counts of forgery, grand larceny, identity theft, and fraud. The DA was treating this as a major case. 2 weeks later, my brother was arrested at his apartment. They charged him with 14 separate felonies. He posted bail within hours using money from Dad's accounts. Money he'd already stolen. That's when things got really ugly. My brother hired Raymond Castellanos, a defense attorney famous for getting wealthy clients acquitted on technicalities. Castellanos immediately went on the offensive. He filed a motion to suppress the security footage, arguing it had been obtained through harassment. He challenged the handwriting analysis as junk science. He demanded psychiatric evaluations for me, claiming I was suffering from grief-induced delusions. The media picked up the story. Local news ran with, "Sister accuses grieving brother of forgery" as their headline. The comment section was brutal. Half the people called me a money-hungry monster. The other half called my brother a sociopath. My brother's girlfriend gave an interview. She was 5 months pregnant at that point, and she played it up perfectly. Tears, hand on her belly, talking about how I was destroying their family over greed. "She's trying to take everything from us," the girlfriend said on camera. "My baby's father might go to prison because she can't accept that their dad changed his mind." I watched that interview alone in my apartment and felt something break inside me. Not sadness, rage, pure white-hot rage at the way they were spinning this. Patricia advised me not to respond publicly. "Let the evidence speak for itself," she said. "They're trying to make this about emotion. We keep it about facts." But the damage was done. People recognized me at the grocery store, at work, at the gas station. Some were supportive. Others muttered comments about family loyalty and greed. I stopped going out except for work. Then my brother escalated. He filed a civil suit against me for defamation and emotional distress, claiming my accusations had destroyed his reputation and caused his girlfriend severe stress that endangered the pregnancy. He was seeking $2 million in damages. It was a transparent intimidation tactic, but it worked. I was drowning in legal fees. Patricia was working pro bono on the criminal case, but I needed a separate attorney for the civil suit. I took out a loan against my car, then a personal loan. I was $40,000 in debt within 3 months. My brother, meanwhile, was still spending Dad's money. His girlfriend's social media showed designer baby clothes, a nursery decorated by a professional, a gender reveal party that cost more than my car. I documented everything, screenshots, dates, receipts I could find through public records. Patricia said it showed consciousness of guilt. An innocent person doesn't go on a spending spree with contested funds. 6 months before the criminal trial, something unexpected happened. I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice said, "Is this the daughter of Thomas Brennan?" That was Dad's name. "Yes," I said carefully. "My name is Carol Henderson," she said. "I was your father's nurse during his final weeks. I saw the news about the will contest. There's something you need to know." I met her at a coffee shop 2 days later. She was in her 50s, with kind eyes and the exhausted look of someone who worked too many double shifts. "Your father talked about his will constantly near the end," she said. "He was worried your brother would try to contest it or find a way around it. He told me multiple times that he'd left you the larger portion because you'd been responsible while your brother had repeatedly let him down." "Did he ever mention changing it?" I asked. "Never," she said firmly. "In fact, 2 days before he died, that would have been March 15th, he made me promise to call you if anything seemed wrong with the estate. He said his son was desperate, and desperate people do desperate things." I felt tears sting my eyes. "Why didn't you call sooner?" "I didn't know something was wrong until I saw the news," she said. "I don't watch TV much, but when I saw your brother's interview and heard him claim your father changed the will on March 15th, I knew that was impossible. Your father was unconscious that entire day. I was on shift. He never woke up." She pulled out a small notebook. "I keep personal notes on my patients," she explained. "It's not official, but it helps me remember details. I have entries from your father's last week." She showed me the pages. Handwritten notes detailing Dad's condition, his conversations, his lucid moments, and his decline. On March 15th, the entry read, "Patient unconscious, unresponsive. Daughter present, keeping vigil. No other visitors." "Can I make a copy of this?" I asked. "You can have the original," she said. "I'll testify if you need me to. Your father was a good man. What your brother is doing is wrong." Patricia submitted Carol's testimony and notes to the prosecution. It was devastating to the defense. A credible medical professional with contemporaneous documentation proving Dad couldn't have signed anything on March 15th. It demolished the defense's argument that Dad had changed his mind before dying. But Castellanos wasn't done. He filed a motion to exclude Carol's testimony, arguing the notes were hearsay and that Carol had a financial motive to testify. She hoped I'd pay her for her trouble. The judge denied the motion. The notes were admissible as business records, and Carol had asked for no compensation. 3 weeks before trial, Castellanos made an offer. "They want to negotiate," Patricia told me. "Your brother is willing to plead guilty to reduce charges in exchange for avoiding trial." "What are they offering?" I asked. "Guilty plea to fraud and attempted theft, 18 months in minimum security, full restitution of everything he took, plus the difference between the real and forged wills. He keeps his right to appeal in civil court, but the criminal case ends." I thought about it. 18 months seemed light for what he'd done, but trials were risky, juries could be unpredictable, and I'd get the money back, which would settle the estate and pay off my debts. But something about letting him plead down bothered me. What does the prosecution think? I asked. They're recommending acceptance, Patricia said. The evidence is strong, but forgery cases can be tricky. If even one juror sympathizes with the grieving son narrative, we could end up with a hung jury or worse. The DA wants the guaranteed conviction. I thought about Dad. About sitting beside his hospital bed while my brother was out planning this betrayal. About the trust Dad had placed in both of us. About Carol's notes describing how Dad had worried about exactly this scenario. No deal, I said. We go to trial. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Are you sure? This is a guaranteed resolution. Trial means risk. I'm sure, I said. If he wanted a deal, he could have returned the money and admitted what he did 6 months ago. He's only offering now because he knows how bad this looks. I want him to face a jury. Patricia nodded slowly. I was hoping you'd say that. Let's go to trial. The trial started on a Tuesday in October, exactly 11 months after Dad died. The courthouse was packed with media. The story had gotten significant attention. Grieving son steals inheritance while father dies had a certain tabloid appeal that the local news couldn't resist. Jury selection took 3 days. We ended up with 7 women and 5 men, ages ranging from mid-20s to late 60s. Patricia had fought to keep anyone with a history of white-collar crime in their family off the jury. Castellanos had done the opposite, looking for people who might sympathize with financial desperation. The prosecution opened with the security footage. They played it 5 times, each time from a different angle. The building had multiple cameras, and they'd synced the footage to show my brother's entire journey, entering the building at 2:47 p.m., taking the elevator to the 3rd floor, checking the hallway, delivering the envelope, then leaving through a side exit. This is not the behavior of an innocent man delivering a legitimate document, the prosecutor said, freezing the frame on my brother's face as he checked the hallway. This is the behavior of a criminal who knows he's committing fraud and doesn't want to be caught. Castellanos countered that the footage showed nothing illegal. My client was delivering documents to his father's attorney during a difficult time. The manner of delivery was irrelevant. He used a mail slot because the office was closed. This is completely normal. But the handwriting expert testimony was devastating. Dr. Patricia Holbrook spent an entire day on the stand. She presented magnified images of both signatures side by side, pointing out every difference. The stroke angles, the pressure variations, the tremor patterns. She showed the jury Dad's medical records documenting his declining motor control. She presented a timeline of his signatures over the final 6 months of his life, showing the progressive deterioration. Then she showed practice attempts found on my brother's computer. The prosecution had uncovered dozens of files, PDFs where my brother had scanned Dad's signature and traced over it repeatedly. The files were named things like Practice 3 and Final Attempt and Signature Perfected. They were dated March 12th, 13th, and 14th, 3 days of practicing Dad's signature, getting it right, preparing for the forgery. The courtroom was completely silent as Dr. Holbrook walked through each file. This shows premeditation, she said. The defendant didn't forge this signature on impulse. He practiced it methodically for 3 days, then executed his plan on March 15th when he knew his father was unconscious and couldn't stop him. When she concluded, Dr. Holbrook stated her findings with absolute certainty. These signatures were written by 2 different people. I can say with 98.7% certainty that Thomas Brennan did not sign the will dated March 15th. His son did. Castellanos tried to shake her testimony on cross-examination. Handwriting analysis isn't an exact science, is it? Nothing is absolute, Dr. Holbrook replied calmly. But I've testified in 87 cases over 23 years. My conclusions have been challenged and upheld repeatedly. I've never been more certain of a forgery than I am of this one, Castellanos pressed. But you're admitting there's a margin of error, a possibility you're wrong. Dr. Holbrook looked directly at the jury. I'm also admitting there's a possibility the sun won't rise tomorrow. Technically possible, but highly unlikely. This signature is a forgery. The medical testimony was equally damning. Dad's oncologist took the stand and walked through the final weeks of his life, the pain management protocols, the declining consciousness, the medical certainty that by March 15th, Dad couldn't have signed his own name if his life depended on it. His hand tremor was so severe by that point that he couldn't hold a cup without assistance, the doctor said. The idea that he could have written a legible signature is medically impossible. The defense tried to argue that Dad might have had a moment of lucidity, a brief window where he rallied and signed the will. The oncologist shut that down immediately. Lucidity doesn't restore motor control, he explained. Mr. Brennan's cancer had metastasized to his spine, affecting his nervous system. Even if he'd been fully awake and alert, his hands wouldn't have worked properly. The signature on that will show steady pressure and controlled strokes that were physically beyond his capability. Then Carol Henderson took the stand. She was perfect, calm, credible, compassionate. She described her 23 years as an oncology nurse, her experience with terminal patients, her relationship with Dad during his final weeks. Mr. Brennan was terrified his son would try something, Carol testified. He told me multiple times that he'd structured the will to protect his daughter, who'd been responsible and caring throughout his illness. He was worried his son, who'd been absent for much of his care, would try to contest or manipulate the estate. Did he ever mention changing the will? The prosecutor asked. Never, Carol said firmly. On March 13th, 2 days before the will was allegedly signed, Mr. Brennan made me promise to contact his daughter if anything seemed wrong after his death. He specifically said, "My son is going to try something. Make sure she knows I never changed my mind." She pulled out her notebook and read from the March 15th entry. Patient unconscious, unresponsive to all stimuli. Daughter present from 6 a.m. through end of shift at 7 p.m. No other visitors. Patient showed no signs of consciousness or voluntary movement. The defense had no effective cross-examination. Castellanos tried to suggest Carol had been influenced by media coverage, but she shut that down quickly. "I don't watch the news," she said. "I saw an article shared on social media 3 months ago and recognized the family name. I contacted the daughter because I made a promise to a dying man. That's all." Then came the financial testimony. A forensic accountant took the stand and walked the jury through every transaction my brother had made. The timeline was damning. Day 1 after Dad's death, $87,000 transferred from savings. Day 3, $42,000 from investments. Day 5, $23,000 from a CD. Week 2, Dad's car sold for $35,000 cash. Week 3, coin collection sold for $18,000. Week 4, life insurance beneficiary changed and payout redirected, $150,000. In total, he'd stolen $355,000 before the will was even read. The accountant showed how each transaction had been carefully structured to avoid immediate detection. Amounts kept just below reporting thresholds. Transfers spread across multiple days. Forged signatures on every document. This wasn't grief or confusion, the accountant testified. This was systematic financial fraud executed with planning and sophistication. The prosecution rested after 6 days of testimony. The evidence was overwhelming. The defense's case was predictable. My brother took the stand, against Castellanos' obvious wishes, and told his version of events. He claimed Dad had given him verbal permission to manage the accounts, that Dad had told him the will needed to be updated to split everything equally, that he'd delivered the will to Morrison's office as a favor to Dad, who was too weak to do it himself. Under direct examination, he seemed believable, remorseful, devastated by the accusations. Then the prosecution cross-examined him. They started gentle, walking him through the timeline, getting him to confirm dates and times. Then they tightened the noose. "You visited your father on March 15th from 9:47 to 10:23 a.m., correct?" "Yes. Hospital records show he was unconscious that entire time." "Did you have a conversation with him?" My brother hesitated. I talked to him. I believe he could hear me." "Did he respond?" "Not verbally, but I felt he understood." "So he didn't tell you to update his will that day?" "He'd told me before." "When?" "I don't remember exactly." The prosecutor showed him Carol's notes documenting every conversation Dad had in his final weeks. There was no mention of wanting to change the will. Only the opposite, concerns that my brother would try something. "Did Nurse Henderson falsify these notes?" My brother's face flushed. "I don't know. Maybe she misunderstood. Or maybe you're lying." Castellanos objected, but the damage was done. The prosecutor moved to the computer files. "Let's talk about these practice signatures. Why were you tracing your father's signature on your computer 3 days before his alleged will update?" My brother stumbled. I was helping organize his papers. I needed to know what his signature looked like for estate documents." "So you traced it 57 times?" "I wanted to be thorough." "For what purpose?" In case I needed to verify documents, or in case you needed to forge one." The objection was sustained, but the jury had heard it. The prosecutor held up the security footage. "You're seen here delivering an envelope to Attorney Morrison's office at 2:51 p.m. on March 15th. You claimed earlier that your father arranged this delivery, but your father was unconscious. So who actually arranged it?" My brother was sweating now. I was helping him by taking care of it." "So you arranged it, not your father." "I was acting on his behalf, without his knowledge, since he was unconscious." My brother's voice rose. "I was doing what he wanted, based on conversations you claim to have had but can't specify when. Conversations no one else heard. Conversations that contradicted everything he told his medical team." My brother looked at Castellanos desperately, but there was no rescue coming. The cross-examination continued for 3 hours. By the end, my brother was a wreck. His story had more holes than substance. His timeline didn't match the evidence. His explanations contradicted each other. The defense called his girlfriend to testify. She was 8 months pregnant now, visibly uncomfortable and emotional. She testified that my brother was a good person who'd been devoted to Dad, that he'd been devastated by the death and confused about the estate, that I was vindictive and had always resented him. It was a sympathy play. Look at the pregnant girlfriend. Look at the baby about to be born. Look at what conviction would do to this young family. The prosecutor's cross-examination was brief. "Did the defendant ever tell you he was forging his father's will?" "No." "Did he tell you he was taking money from the estate accounts before they were settled?" "He said he was managing things." "Did he tell you he'd practiced his father's signature on his computer?" She hesitated. "No." "So everything you know about this case comes from what the defendant told you. You have no independent knowledge of events." "I know he loved his father." "That's not an answer to my question." No further questions. When the defense rested, Castellanos made his closing argument. He painted my brother as a grieving son overwhelmed by responsibility, a man who'd made mistakes but hadn't committed crimes, a father-to-be who deserved compassion, not prison. "He's not perfect," Castellanos said, "but he's not a criminal." This is a family tragedy being turned into a legal persecution by a sister who can't accept that her father's final wishes were different than she wanted. The prosecution's closing was devastating. They replayed the security footage one final time. They showed the practice signature files. They quoted Carol's notes. They walked through the financial timeline. This is not a family tragedy, the prosecutor said. This is calculated fraud. The defendant didn't make mistakes. He executed a plan. He waited until his father was unconscious and dying. Then he forged a will to steal an inheritance he hadn't earned. And when that wasn't enough, he systematically looted the estate, taking hundreds of thousands of dollars he had no legal right to. She pointed at my brother. He practiced his father's signature for 3 days. He waited until the attorney's office was empty. He delivered the forged will in secret. Then he started spending his father's money before the body was cold. These aren't the actions of a confused, grieving son. These are the actions of a thief. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. When they returned, the 4 women read the verdict. Count 1, forgery in the first degree, guilty. Count 2, grand larceny, guilty. Count 3, identity theft, guilty. Guilty on all 14 counts. My brother's face crumbled. His girlfriend burst into tears so loud the judge had to call for order. Castellanos immediately started talking about appeals. I sat in the gallery feeling nothing. Not relief, not vindication, not even satisfaction. Just exhaustion. The judge ordered my brother remanded to custody pending sentencing. No more bail. Given the verdict and the severity of the crimes, he was now considered a flight risk. As the deputies led him away in handcuffs, he looked back at me. Our eyes met for just a moment. I didn't look away. Sentencing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, the media coverage was intense. The case had everything they loved: family drama, deathbed betrayal, a pregnant girlfriend, and a sympathetic victim. I gave one interview to a local reporter. I kept it brief. This was never about money, I said. This was about honoring my father's wishes. He spent his final days worried that my brother would do exactly what he did. I couldn't let that stand. My brother's girlfriend gave a dozen interviews. She painted herself as the real victim, a woman about to give birth while her baby's father went to prison because of his vindictive sister. The public was divided. Some people saw me as a hero standing up to fraud. Others saw me as a heartless sister destroying her brother's life over greed. I stopped reading the comments. The sentencing hearing was held on a Friday morning. The courtroom was packed again. Media, family friends, curious onlookers. The prosecution recommended 4 years in state prison plus full restitution. Castellanos argued for probation, citing my brother's lack of criminal history, his impending fatherhood, and his genuine remorse. The judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I'd been dreading this moment. I'd written and rewritten what I wanted to say a dozen times. But standing there looking at my brother in his orange jumpsuit, most of it felt unnecessary. I kept it simple. Dad loved you, I said. My voice was steady. He paid for your rehab 3 times. He bailed you out of jail. He gave you $50,000 to start a business you never launched. When he knew he was dying, he still left you $240,000. That wasn't enough for you. My brother was crying now, his shoulders shaking. You forged his signature while he was unconscious in a hospital bed, I continued. You stole from him before his body was cold. You spent months planning this, practicing his signature, waiting for the right moment, covering your tracks. And then you tried to steal from me by erasing his final wishes. I paused. I don't care about the money. I care that you let Dad die thinking his affairs were in order, that his children would be taken care of fairly, that his final act as a father would be respected. Instead, you turned his death into a crime scene. The courtroom was completely silent. I sat down. My hands were shaking. The judge asked my brother if he had anything to say. He stood slowly, supported by Castellanos. I'm sorry, he whispered. His voice was hoarse from crying. I was desperate. The gambling debts, the bills. I made terrible choices. I never meant to hurt anyone. The judge's expression didn't change. Desperation doesn't excuse fraud, Mr. Brennan. Debt doesn't justify stealing from your dying father. And remorse that comes only after conviction isn't worth much. She sentenced him to 5 years in state prison, more than even the prosecution had recommended. The courtroom erupted. His girlfriend screamed. Castellanos immediately started shouting about appeals. The judge banged her gavel. Full restitution, the judge continued over the noise. $355,000 for what you stole from the estate. $245,000 for the difference between the legitimate will distribution and your forgery, plus $78,000 in legal fees, court costs, and damages to your sister. In total, $678,000. Additionally, the judge continued, you are permanently barred from serving as executor, trustee, or having power of attorney for any estate. You will never again have legal authority over another person's finances. She looked directly at my brother. You didn't just commit fraud, Mr. Brennan. You betrayed a dying man who loved you despite your repeated failures. You stole his final act of fatherhood and tried to erase his last wishes. 5 years is lenient compared to what you deserve. The deputies moved to take him away. His girlfriend tried to rush forward but was held back by court security. Please, she sobbed. Our baby. What about our baby? The judge turned to her, expression softening slightly. Your child is innocent in this, but her father's actions have consequences. Perhaps you should have considered that before helping him spend stolen money. The girlfriend's face went pale. I didn't know. The bank records suggest otherwise, the judge said coldly. You may want to consult with your own attorney. As my brother was led from the courtroom, he turned back one last time. Our eyes met. I hope you're happy, he mouthed. I felt nothing. The estate was finally settled 4 months later. After the criminal conviction, there was no question about the will's validity. I received the 70% share Dad had intended, approximately $560,000 after estate taxes and fees. The first thing I did was pay off my debts. $47,000 in legal fees and personal loans, gone in a single payment. Then I donated $100,000 to the hospital's cancer research fund in Dad's name, the same hospital where he'd died, where Carol had kept her vigil, where I'd spent those final weeks watching him fade. Another $75,000 went to a nonprofit that helps families navigate end-of-life care and estate planning. I'd learned the hard way how vulnerable people are when grief clouds judgment. The remaining money went into conservative investments and a trust fund. Money I barely touched because every time I looked at the account balance, I thought about what it had cost. My brother was transferred to a medium-security prison 3 hours away. His daughter, my niece, was born 2 weeks after his sentencing. His girlfriend posted photos online. The baby had Dad's eyes. She named her Autumn, Dad's favorite season. I saw the photos and felt something crack inside me. That baby was innocent. She'd done nothing wrong. But she'd grow up visiting her father in prison, asking questions about why, learning eventually that her dad had stolen from her dying grandfather. Some legacies are heavier than others. My brother sent his first letter 4 months into his sentence. It was 8 pages long, rambling apologies mixed with explanations and justifications. He was sorry. He'd been desperate. The gambling addiction had gotten bad again. He'd borrowed from dangerous people. He thought he'd pay everything back before anyone noticed. I read it once, then filed it away without responding. The second letter came 2 months later. This one was different. Angry. Bitter. Accusations that I'd destroyed his life over greed, that I'd taken everything from him. His freedom, his daughter's infancy, his future, that I was vindictive and cruel and had always hated him. I filed that one away too. The letters kept coming, sometimes apologetic, sometimes angry, sometimes begging me to help with his appeal, to set up a fund for his daughter, to write a letter to the parole board when the time came. I never responded to any of them. His girlfriend, now his wife, they'd gotten married by proxy while he was inside, sent messages too. First through social media, then through mutual acquaintances, then through cards to my apartment. She wanted me to meet my niece. She wanted help with bills. She wanted me to contribute to Autumn's college fund. She wanted me to acknowledge that I'd destroyed their family. Each message came with photos of Autumn, learning to crawl, first birthday, first steps. I blocked her on every platform. People told me I was cold, that the baby was innocent, that family was family, that grudges were poison. But they didn't understand. This wasn't about grudges or revenge. It was about boundaries. About refusing to reward theft and betrayal with access to my life. My brother had made choices. His wife had stood by him, even helped spend stolen money. They'd built their family on fraud. I didn't owe them forgiveness. I didn't owe them relationship. I didn't owe them anything. A year after the sentencing, I got a call from Morrison. Your brother's attorney is filing an appeal, he said. They're claiming ineffective counsel and arguing the sentence was excessive. They're also filing a civil suit against you for malicious prosecution. I felt my chest tighten. Another lawsuit? It won't go anywhere, Morrison assured me. The criminal conviction is solid, but it means more legal fees, more court dates, more harassment. How much? I asked. He quoted a number that made me sick. I'll pay it, I said. Whatever it takes. The appeal was denied 6 months later. The civil suit was dismissed as frivolous. But Castellanos had accomplished his goal. He'd cost me another $35,000 in legal fees and months of stress. My brother served 3 years before being released on parole. Good behavior. Model prisoner. Completed rehabilitation programs. He walked out of prison to a small apartment his wife had been maintaining through public assistance and under-the-table work. I learned this through the private investigator I'd hired to track him. I wasn't stalking him. I was protecting myself. I needed to know if he came near me, if he violated parole, if he tried anything else. The investigator sent monthly reports. My brother got a job at a warehouse. His wife worked part-time at a grocery store. They were barely scraping by. Autumn was in Head Start. They qualified for food stamps. The report noted that my brother had applied for dozens of jobs in his field. He'd been an accountant before the arrest. But no one would hire a convicted fraudster. I felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy. Then I remembered the security footage, the practice signatures, the systematic theft. The flicker died. 2 years after his release, my brother's wife tried one more time. She sent a registered letter to my apartment. Inside was a handwritten note and a crayon drawing from Autumn. The drawing showed 3 stick figures labeled Mommy, Daddy, and Autumn. In the corner, in a child's handwriting, I wish I had an aunt. The letter from his wife was simple. She asks about you. She knows she has an aunt. She doesn't understand why you won't meet her. I'm not asking for money or forgiveness. I'm asking for one afternoon so a little girl can meet her family. Please. I stared at that letter for 3 days. I thought about Autumn, 5 years old now. Innocent, curious, asking questions about the aunt she'd never met. I thought about Dad, about what he would have wanted, about family and forgiveness and second chances. Then I thought about the security footage, about my brother checking the hallway before sliding that envelope through the mail slot, about the 3 days he'd spent practicing Dad's signature while Dad was dying, about the choice he'd made, Not in a moment of desperation, but over days and weeks of calculated planning. I wrote a single sentence in reply. Your husband made choices that have consequences. This is one of them. I sent it certified mail. Then I moved apartments without leaving a forwarding address. 3 months later, I got a notification that my brother had violated parole. He'd been caught gambling at an illegal card game. He was back in prison for 18 months. His wife's social media went dark after that. No more photos of Autumn. No more posts about their struggles. Just silent. I checked occasionally, more habit than interest. Once a year, maybe. Enough to confirm they were still alive, but not enough to feel involved. 4 years after his second release, I got a message from a lawyer I didn't recognize. It was brief. I represent your brother in a custody matter. Your testimony may be required. Please contact me at your earliest convenience. I called Patricia immediately. What custody matter? She made some calls. The answer came back within hours. My brother and his wife were divorcing. She was seeking full custody of Autumn, now 9 years old. Part of her case involved my brother's criminal history, his ongoing gambling addiction, and his inability to maintain stable employment. My brother's attorney wanted me to testify that he'd been a good brother, a caring son, someone who'd made mistakes but was fundamentally decent. They wanted me to help him keep custody of his daughter. I laughed, actually laughed. The sound surprised me. Tell them no, I said to Patricia. I'm not testifying for him. They can subpoena you, she warned. Then let them, I said. I'll show up and tell the truth about exactly who he is. The subpoena never came. Apparently, my brother's attorney had second thoughts about putting me on the stand. The custody case settled out of court. His wife got primary custody. My brother got supervised visitation every other weekend. I learned this from the investigator's report. Then I canceled the investigator's contract. I didn't need monthly updates anymore. My brother's life was no longer my concern. 5 years passed in relative quiet. I bought a small house in a different city. I got promoted at the hospital, head nurse in the ICU. I dated occasionally, though nothing serious. I built a life that was mine, separate from everything that had happened. I thought about Dad often, about our last conversation, about how he'd squeezed my hand and told me I was the child he'd never worried about. I'd kept that promise. I'd fought for his wishes. I'd made sure his final act as a father had been honored. But the cost had been everything else. No family, no niece, no possibility of reconciliation. Just money in an account and memories of a man who died hoping his children would take care of each other. Then, last month, something arrived that changed everything. A package came to my house, forwarded through 3 addresses before reaching me. Inside was a shoebox wrapped in brown paper. No return address, no note, just the box. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. Dad and my brother from before I was born. Dad teaching him to ride a bike. First day of school. Little league games. Birthday parties. At the bottom of the box was a letter in handwriting I didn't recognize. It was dated 3 weeks earlier. Dear Aunt, it began. My name is Autumn. I'm 14 years old. My mom helped me find your address. She says I shouldn't write to you, but I wanted to anyway. I know what my dad did. I'm not a little kid anymore. I read the court documents. I know he stole from Grandpa Thomas and forged his will. I know he went to prison. I know why you don't talk to us. I'm not writing to ask you to forgive him. I'm writing because I found these photos in a box in our storage unit. Mom says they're the only pictures of Grandpa we have. Dad won't talk about him. He just gets quiet and sad. I never met Grandpa Thomas. He died before I was born. But looking at these pictures, I can see he loved my dad once. And my dad loved him. I don't know what happened to them. I know my dad did something terrible. But these pictures show there was good too, before everything went wrong. I'm sending them to you because Mom says you knew Grandpa best. She says you were with him when he died. She says you're the one who really loved him. I thought you should have these, and I thought you should know that I think about him sometimes. About the grandpa I never met. About the family we could have been. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know I exist. And that maybe someday when you're ready, I'd like to hear stories about Grandpa Thomas. Not to fix anything with my dad, just to know where I come from. Sincerely, Autumn. I sat on my floor with those photos spread around me and cried for the first time in years. Not for my brother. Not for the stolen money or the forged will or the betrayal. For Dad. For the grandfather Autumn would never meet. For the family that had shattered into pieces too sharp to reassemble. For the little girl who looked like Dad in the photo she'd included. Her 9th grade school picture. Those same eyes staring at the camera with the same gentle expression. I looked through the old photos. Dad so young, beaming with pride at his firstborn son. My brother as a child, innocent and happy, before addiction and desperation and bad choices. Evidence of what we'd been before everything fell apart. I put the photos back in the box carefully. Then I sat down and wrote a reply. Dear Autumn, thank you for the photos. You're right. I should have them. Your grandfather was one of the best men I've ever known. He loved deeply, forgave repeatedly, and tried until the end to do right by both his children. What your father did was unforgivable. I won't pretend otherwise, and I won't soften the truth to make anyone more comfortable. He forged a dying man's signature, stole money from his estate, and tried to erase his father's final wishes. Those are facts. But you're also right that there was good once. Before the addiction, before the desperation, before the choices that destroyed everything, there was a brother I loved and a son your grandfather believed in. I can't have a relationship with your father. That door is closed and will stay closed, but you're not responsible for his choices. If you want to know about your grandfather, about who he was, what he loved, what he believed, I'll tell you. Not to fix your family or change the past. Just because you deserve to know where you come from. I'm enclosing some things of your grandfather's. A watch he wore every day. A coin from his collection that survived. A letter he wrote me when I started nursing school. These are yours now. Part of your history. If you want to write again, you can. If you don't, I understand. Either way, know this. You're not defined by your father's mistakes. You get to choose who you become. Your grandfather would have loved you very much. Sincerely, your aunt. I sent it with Dad's watch, one of his silver dollars, and the letter he'd written me 15 years ago about being proud of the person I'd become. 3 weeks later, I got a response. Autumn had questions about Dad's favorite foods, his hobbies, what made him laugh, about the cancer, the hospital, the final days. I answered honestly. I told her about Dad's terrible jokes and his love of old westerns, about how he'd spent 5 years restoring a 1967 Mustang in the garage, about how he'd held my hand in the hospital and worried about both his children until the end. I told her the good parts. Not to erase what her father had done, but to give her something to hold on to. We've been writing for 8 months now. Sometimes letters, sometimes emails. She sends me her report cards and photos from school events. I send her stories about Dad, and occasional gifts for her birthday. It's not a relationship with my brother. It's not forgiveness or reconciliation or healing. It's just an aunt who never existed getting to know a niece she'd spent years avoiding. Last week, Autumn asked if we could meet in person, just for coffee, just to put a face to the letters. I said yes. We're meeting next month in a neutral city, halfway between where we each live. Her mother will be there too. Autumn's still a minor, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm terrified. I'm not sure what I'm doing or if this is a mistake, but I keep thinking about Dad's last words to me, about being the child he never worried about taking care of things. Maybe this is part of that. My brother sends letters occasionally, still apologizing, still explaining, still asking for things I'll never give. I don't respond. That door is still closed. But Autumn isn't her father. She's a smart, thoughtful teenager who deserves to know her family history, even the ugly parts. She deserves to know about the man her grandfather was, about the brother who existed before addiction and desperation destroyed him, about the complicated truth that people can be both loved and lost. So next month, I'll meet my niece for the first time. I'll look into eyes that are Dad's eyes and tell her stories about the grandfather she never met. I'll give her the truth, all of it, the good and the bad and everything in between. And maybe, in some small way, I'll give her what Dad tried to give both his children, a chance to choose better. It won't fix what my brother destroyed. It won't bring back the family we could have been. It won't change the security footage or the forged signature or the years of betrayal, but it's something. And after 10 years of nothing, something feels like enough. I still have the security footage saved on 3 different drives. I still watch it sometimes when I need to remember why I did what I did. The timestamp still reads 2:51 p.m. My brother still glances left, then right, then slides the envelope through the mail slot. 38 seconds that changed everything. But now, when I watch it, I think about Autumn too. About the teenager who exists because of choices she didn't make, carrying a legacy she didn't ask for. About how sometimes the best way to honor the dead is to give the living a chance to be better than those who came before. Dad would have wanted that. He would have wanted me to fight for his wishes, which I did. But he also would have wanted me to break the cycle, to choose connection over bitterness when it was actually possible. So I'm trying, not for my brother, not to forgive or forget or make peace with the unforgivable, but for a girl who shares Dad's eyes and asks questions about the grandfather she never met, for the possibility that something good can still grow from the wreckage. That's not the ending I expected when this started, but it's the one I have. My brother stole my inheritance by forging Dad's signature. I sent him to prison with security footage from the lawyer's office. And 10 years later, I'm meeting the niece I never knew, because she asked to hear stories about a grandfather who died, hoping his children would take care of each other. We couldn't do that. But maybe we can do this. It's not redemption. It's not closure. It's not a happy ending. It's just the next chapter in a story that's still being written. And for now, that has to be enough.